Imagine a world where there are no humans yet, and the sky and earth are ruled by mighty beings called Titans. This generation of divine forces, born from chaos and the primordial gods, held the fate of the universe in their hands. The Titans were enormous, more powerful than any creature, and each of them embodied a certain force of nature: the sky, the sea, memory, justice. At the head stood Cronus, who overthrew his father Uranus by cutting him with a sickle and became the ruler of the world himself. But along with that, he received a terrible prophecy. One of his children would one day overthrow him from the throne just as he himself had overthrown his father. Fear and cruelty became Cronus' companions. To escape his fate, he devoured every infant born to his wife Rhea. But one day Rhea hid the newborn Zeus and put a stone in his place. Thus began the story of the greatest war of the gods in Greek mythology, the Titanomachy. It was a battle of generations, the old Titans who held the sky and earth in their power, against the young Olympians, who sought freedom and a new order. The Titanomachy lasted a whole decade, and its outcome forever changed the face of the universe. It was thanks to this war that we know the gods who became the foundation of Greek religion: Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, Hera, Demeter, and Hestia. Their victory opened a new era. But the path to it was bloody and filled with betrayal, cruelty, and superhuman battles. Rhea, exhausted by the cruelty of her husband Cronus, dared to resort to a trick. When Zeus was born, she fled to Crete, where, in a cave hidden from sight, she concealed the infant. According to legend, he was raised by nymphs and the goat Amalthea, who fed Zeus with her milk. To keep Cronus from hearing the child's cries, the Curetes, warrior protectors, clashed their shields and swords to drown out the sounds. Little Zeus grew up in secrecy, and from an early age he felt his divine power. He was destined to become the liberator of his brothers and sisters, whom Cronus had imprisoned in his own belly. When Zeus came of age, he cunningly forced Cronus to vomit up the children: Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Poseidon, and Hades. Thus, a new generation of gods was formed, ready to challenge the Titans. This moment marked the beginning of a great conflict. The Olympians, still young and inexperienced in battle but filled with determination, sought to overthrow the old tyranny. They knew their strength lay in unity, as well as in the support of those who hated Cronus' rule. Zeus began to seek allies. The first were the Centaurs, the hundred-handed giants, and the Cyclopes, whom Cronus had once imprisoned in Tartarus. Zeus freed them, and they repaid him, gifting him thunder and lightning, Poseidon a trident, and Hades a helmet of invisibility. Armed with these divine artifacts, the young gods were ready for the war that would overturn the course of history. When Zeus and his brothers and sisters gathered their strength, they openly rose against the Titans. This marked the beginning of a 10-year war, which the Greeks called the Titanomachy. The Titans stood under the command of Cronus, supported by the mighty Atlas, whose strength equaled that of entire armies. On the side of the Olympians fought the younger deities, the Cyclopes, and the hundred-handed giants. The battles raged across different realms of the universe: on the earth, in the sky, and in the depths of the ocean. Zeus' thunderbolts roared, Poseidon's trident raised waves to the heavens, and Hades' helmet of invisibility allowed him to strike enemies from the shadows. But there were many Titans, and their power seemed endless. Cronus was a cunning and ruthless commander who had never known defeat. This war was not merely a struggle for power, it was a battle for a new order of the world. The Titans embodied the old era, founded on fear and mercilessness. The Olympians, on the other hand, sought to establish justice, though they too often relied on trickery and force. The first years of battle brought no advantage to either side. Mountains crumbled, seas spilled over their shores, and the sky was torn apart by thunder and lightning. The world became a battlefield where no peace existed. Humanity had not yet appeared, but even gods and demons trembled at the force that raged during this war. Among the Titans, one stood out: Atlas. His strength was so great that even Zeus feared a direct confrontation. Atlas was considered the mightiest warrior of his time, and it was he who held the front in the hardest moments. His blows shattered cliffs, and his roars forced even the hundred-handed giants to retreat. For the Olympians, Atlas was a true nightmare. Zeus hurled thunderbolts, but Atlas endured. Poseidon raised towering waves, yet the Titan broke through them. Even Hades, with his helmet of invisibility, could not deliver a fatal strike. In battle, Atlas seemed invincible, yet even he could not change the course of the entire war. The struggle dragged on for years, and gradually the Olympians learned to act in unison, combining their powers. They realized that only by uniting could they hope to defeat even the strongest of the Titans. It was against Atlas that they devised a special strategy, one that would later determine his fate. But at that time, he remained the steadfast pillar of Cronus' army, the very symbol of the Titans' might and their refusal to retreat. In the darkest days of the war, when the sky overflowed with lightning and stones rained down like hail, Zeus and his brothers had to find allies that no Titan's might could break. They descended into the dungeons of Tartarus, where depth and oblivion merged into one. There, in the shadowy chasms, lay those whom Cronus had once imprisoned, the Cyclopes, one-eyed forgers of divine fire, and the Centaurs, hundred-handed giants with the strength to shatter mountains. Their release became a turning point. The Cyclopes, grateful for their freedom, set to work forging. In their hands were born the weapons that would change the course of battle. They forged thunderbolts for Zeus, not mere missiles, but concentrated wrath of the sky, wrapped in light. They created the trident for Poseidon, a symbol of dominion over the seas, and to them belonged the furious helm of Hades, an artifact that granted invisibility and filled enemies with terror of the shadows. The Centaurs, with their immense strength and countless arms, became living battering rams and stone hurlers. They lifted mountains and hurled them upon the Titans' ranks, shattering their lines. This was not only a technical but also a sacred moment. New weapons and new allies, as if fate itself had taken the side of the younger gods. Their art of forging and their extraordinary strength became the argument that began to break the weight of the Titans' invincibility. From this moment, the battles took on new meaning. Victory was no longer merely a matter of muscle, but of ideas, cunning, and the destiny-forged arms. When the new weapons found their way into the hands of the Olympians, the battlefield thundered anew. Zeus, holding a lightning bolt in his hand, became the heart of the storm. His strikes tore open the clouds and scattered the ranks of the Titans' allies. Poseidon, raising his trident, unleashed pursuing waves that shattered the harbors of the Titans' ships and washed away the shores where their warriors stood. Hades, with the helm of shadows, slipped unnoticed through their formations, striking from the rear and carving chaos into the enemy's lines. The battle unfolded across every dimension. The sea rose, stones flew through the air, the sky split with lightning. Atlas, the embodiment of the Titan's strength and endurance, charged into the fray, unleashing waves of destruction. Yet each time it seemed the Titans might turn the tide of war, the Cyclopes' forges answered. Lightning bolts shattered their shields, and the Centaurs tore through their banners. It was, in a word, a symphony of ruin, every sound a roar of steel hammers, every beam of light the trail of a divine strike. But the cruelty of battle was not only external. Doubts arose among the gods, along with tricks and betrayals. The Titans, fighting in desperation, called upon primordial forces, the fertility of the earth and the deep-born demons who guarded their memory. The Olympians responded not only with strength but with design. They blended power with strategy, and this combination reshaped the rhythm of war. What had begun as a clash of bodies became a contest of ideas, a new political model against the old order. Gradually, like ice melting beneath the spring sun, the strength of the Titans' ranks began to give way. They still fought in desperation, lifting mountains and hurling them into battle, yet each strike only opened new wounds in their coordination. When the turning point finally came, the Olympians proved that victory was the fruit of unity. Zeus, with his storming wrath, split their banners. Poseidon, breaking the waves, shattered their rear. Hades, from the shadows, undermined the enemy's foundation. The battlefield began to clear of its former rulers. The Titans, bound in immortal chains, were dragged into the abyss of Tartarus. There, bottomless pits lined with stone and curses awaited them. It was there the beings once worshipped as protectors of the world were cast down. The Centaurs, those whom Zeus had once freed, now stood as guardians, not to hurl stones, but to secure the new order, ensuring no Titan could awaken and return. Some fates were harsher still. Atlas, who had stood like an unshakable pillar of resistance, after defeat received his punishment. He was commanded to bear forever the weight of the heavens upon his shoulders. This was not mere punishment, but a symbol. Even the strongest could become a prisoner of the system born from the ruins of the old world. And so, the chains and abysses of Tartarus became the new boundary, the line dividing what had once been from what had only just begun. When the dust of battle settled and the winds grew still, at the dawn of a new age a different order arose. The Olympian gods, straight from the battlefield, divided the realms among themselves. Zeus received the sky and authority over the heavenly order, Poseidon the oceans and watery expanses, Hades the underworld of Tartarus and shadows. Thus were drawn the boundaries of responsibility and power meant to prevent the chaos that had once consumed the world before the war. But this victory was not without its sacrifices and burdens. The new order required institutions, temples, rituals, festivals, and laws, all created to root the Olympians' rule within the universe. Priests, prophets, and poets began to shape the narrative of victory, a story in which youth and justice triumphed over ancient oppression. Yet in some hearts stirred the shadows of defiance, a memory of the Titan's greatness, of what had long been lost. Atlas and those cast into Tartarus remained within myth as reminders that victory is only the beginning of another cycle of struggle. This new era brought with it another truth. Power, even divine, is vulnerable to the sin of human greed. The Olympians, who had triumphed through unity and cunning, would themselves soon become the subjects of other myths, sometimes noble, sometimes deceitful, sometimes repeating the weaknesses of mortals. The Titanomachy ended as a military campaign, but its echoes became the foundation of culture, religion, and morality that would accompany humanity for centuries to come. After long years of battle, when the thunder fell silent and the cries of warriors were lost to the winds, the moment the Olympians had awaited finally came. At the peak of the mountain that would later become their home, Olympus, they gathered around the sacred hearth. Lightning no longer struck from the sky, but shone only as a sign of Zeus' authority. The gods raised their cups of nectar and sang hymns praising the victory over the old order. Athena, born during the war itself, became the symbol of wisdom and military cunning, without which this triumph would have been impossible. Hermes, still young and sly, already proclaimed that the memory of the war must live on in legend. The Centimanes and Cyclopes received their reward, freedom and honor, stolen from them by the Titans. Even the earth, scarred by battle, seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Yet despite the celebration, a chill lingered in the silence. Each god understood that power was not only a reward, but also a burden. The festive flame was at once a sign of hope and a reminder. The struggle was not over, for the world would always seek a new balance. Among all the punished Titans, Atlas' fate was the harshest. His strength and endurance, with which he had held the lines in war, became the cause of his own curse. He was doomed to bear the vault of the heavens upon his shoulders, forever, without rest, without hope of release. This image became the symbol of all that the Titanomachy meant. The victory of some is always built upon the suffering of others. Atlas stood at the edge of the world, where the heavens touched the earth. His knees bent, yet he never fell. His gaze was fixed forward, as if he saw all the generations that would live beneath the sky he held. The mortals who would later weave myths saw in him not only punishment, but sacrifice, an eternal reminder that even gods are not free from the laws of the cosmos. And every time mortals looked up at the stars, they remembered Atlas, the silent giant who held the world aloft, so it would not fall. Yet even in victory there was no peace. Seers and oracles began to prophesy that just as the Titans had fallen at the hands of the Olympians, so too might the Olympians one day meet the same fate. In the temple fires, smoke rose to the heavens, and from its shadow words were born, "None are eternal, not even the gods." Zeus listened to the prophecies with unease. He knew that one day new powers might rise, capable of challenging him. And even then, in the earliest days of his reign, he commanded not only the building of temples but also the establishment of rituals to bind mortals in loyalty. For human faith itself would become the new source of divine strength. The fear of future wars did not fade even after victory. Within the hearts of the Olympians dwelled a lingering unrest, for fate was a law stronger than any weapon or lightning bolt. The victory over the Titans opened the path to the creation of a new world. The earth came alive after the destruction, forests blossomed, rivers once more carried their waters, and the first humans began to form tribes, gazing at the sky and worshipping the new gods. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades finally divided power among themselves: the sky, the sea, and the underworld. In this triad was reflected the very structure of the cosmos. The people who lived between sky and earth began shaping their understanding of order based on this division. The temples raised in honor of the gods became the first symbols of civilization. In these sacred places, people offered sacrifices, sang hymns, and learned to see in the gods not only rulers but also protectors. The Olympians became part of the culture that shaped the identity of an entire world. Over time, the Titanomachy ceased to be merely a war. It became a myth. Poets sang of it in hymns, priests retold its story through the flames of temples, and people listened in wonder at how gods once fought against gods. The myth became not only a memory of victory but also a lesson. It reminded all that the world is always caught in the struggle between the old and the new. It showed that even the mightiest can be overthrown, and that the weakest, united, are capable of triumph. The memory of the war became the foundation for new myths, of heroes who challenged the gods, of mortals who fought for freedom, of fate itself, which always leads to change. The Titanomachy did not end within the myths. It became a symbol of eternal struggle, a cycle in which the old always yields to the new. For the Greeks, this story was not only an explanation of the gods' origins but also a lesson for society. Nothing can halt the passage of time and change. This symbol permeated everything: politics, art, religion. When the Greeks looked up at the starry sky, they remembered Atlas. When they heard thunder, they saw the hand of Zeus. When the sea rose, they felt Poseidon's trident. The myth lived in every force of nature, in every stirring of the human soul. And so, the story of the war of gods and titans became not just a legend, but an eternal mirror in which people saw themselves and their own battles.